Welcome to the Redux Essential tutorial. This tutorial will introduce you to the Redux and teach you how to use it right away using our latest recommended technique. And let's first talk about what is a Redux. Redux is a pattern and library for managing and updating application state using event called actions. It serves as a centralized store for the state that needed to be used across your entire application, with rules ensure that the state can only be updated in a predictable fashion. And why should I use Redux? Redux helps you managing global state, the state that is needed across many parts of your application. These patterns and tools provided Redux make it easier to understand when and where, why, and how the state in your application is being updated, and how your application logic will be when these changes occurs. Redux guides you towards writing codes which is predictable and testable, which helps you confidence that your application will work as expected. So when should I use Redux? Redux helps you deal with the shared state management, but like any tool, it always has trade-offs. These are more concept to learn and more code to write. It also adds some indirection to your code and asks you to follow certain restriction and trade-off between some parts of long-term productivity. Like, for example, Redux expects that all state updated are done immutably. So, to start the tutorial, there are some important Redux terms that you will need to familiar with before we continue. The first one is the action. As in action, go in. An action is a plain JavaScript object that has a type field. You can think of an action as an event that describes something that happens in application. The type field should be a string that gives this action a descriptive name, like to do or to do added. We usually write that type of string like domain and event name, where the first part is the feature and category that the action belongs to, and the second part is the specific thing that happens. An action object can also have other fields like additional information about what happened. By convention, we put that information in a field called payload. The second one is the reducer. A reducer is a function that receives the current state and an action objective describes how to update the state if necessary and return the new statement. State actions to new state. You can think of a reducer as an event listener which handles events based on the received actions type. And then store. The current Redux application stays live in an object called the store. The store is created by passing a reducer and has a method called getState that returns the currently state value. Now let's talk about the depatches. The Redux stores has a method called depatch. The only way to update the state is to call store depatch and pass in an action object. The store will run its reducer function and save the new state value inside. And we can call getState to retrieve the updated value. You can kind of think of depatching action as a triggering on event in the application, sometimes something happened and we went to the store to know about it. Reducer acts like event listener, and when we hear the action they're listening in, they updated the state in response. Next, we're going to talk about the selector. The selector are function that knows how to extract a specific place of information from a store value. As an application grows bigger, this can help avoid repeating logic as different part of the app needs to read the same data. Here is a graph which is dynamically shows how the logic goes. This is basically the Redux application data flow. And earlier we talked about the one-way data flow, which described this sequence of steps to update the app. First, state describe the contents of the app at a specific point in time. The UI is rendering the basics on the state. When something happens, such as a user clicked a button, the state is updated based on what occurred. The UI re-render based on the new state. And last of all, let's summarize what we just talked about. The Redux is a library for managing global application state. It's typically used the library for integrating the Redux and React together. Redux Toolkit is a recommended way to write Redux logic, and it uses one-way data flow app structure. The structure describes the condition of the app at the point of the time, and the UI rendering based on that state. When something happens in the app, the UI dispatches an action, the store runs in the reducer, and the state is updated based on the occurring. The store notified the UI that state has changed. The UI re-render based on the new state. And Redux uses several types of code. Actions are plain objected with a type field and describe what happened in the app. Reducer are functions that calculated a new state value based on previous state plus an action. A Redux store also runs the root reducer whenever a action is dispatched. In a diagram like this, the Redux selector stores, actions, handlers, or even like this another cycle actions, creates actions, dispatcher reducer state. These are all very scary terminology that if you are new to Redux, it is very scary that you don't know what any of these means. So you feel like there's a mountain of things you have to learn to understand the Redux stuff and how it works. But if you already worked with React, you should pretty much know how Redux will work, and you will be able to understand all this terminology, because it is very simple. We break the Redux down and it does the problem it solves. That's actually quite clear here. Now let's get started. So to explain what Redux does, I have set up a very simple, very minimalistic React and Redux application. Just to show you, this is just to explain how Redux does, and I have done is been create a very simple web app button. One is building Redux, React, and one is in Redux. And all what they do is if you click on one of them, the number will increase the count, or the count will increase. Same with the Redux button. If you look at code, we're just going to compare the contrast and the difference. So we look at the React component, the use state. With 0 as starting value, then we have set value, which is going to increment our count by 1. So there is a function essential that will increase this value every time we click it. Now if we take a look at the Redux component, you will realize what the difference here. Instead of using date, we use selector that we grab the value from Redux. And then we have used the patches. This is something that you would always have to do if you're going to use in Action Creator. So now Action Creator Essential, if you look right here, the set the value, we are patching set value. It looks kind of scary right here. But now the big of deal, because if you look set value, it's doing essential the same thing, except we have a detached in front of it and the set value inside that. So everything you're calling an action creator, which is just a function, you're going to have to patch it now. If you look at this, we are importing set values from our reducer file. So set basically an action creator is what they call it. And you're looking here. This is our boiling plate for setting our value. So basically, this is a function that does what React really has set up, and kind of implicit doing is to update the state value by 1, whereas here we have a React action creator, and then we have a case set value, which is doing essential the same thing, except it's updating the state or stores what they can do in Redux. So essentially, we have the action creator, and then we have a Redux case that will allow us to update states. So essentially, these two together combination would do what this is essentially doing. So what they're doing is kind of the same thing, and I'll explain this difference in why you would need Redux, and instead for something like this obvious, you can just do it with React. But this I can really show you the Redux is how you would do it. Of course, you have to set up in Redux. This is just, I didn't mention, but this is just to set up Redux, and all you have to do is set that once, and then you're good to go. Alright, let's explain further. I create a diagram as what it's doing. We have our state over here. This is our React version. So basically, we have our state, and then the value that is being displayed, and set values is going to be updated the state. So anytime you call that set value, it is going to be updated. The state of the value will be the same updated. You will have the new value. So look at the Redux version. I have created something similar. If you look at here, we have the state, but we now have a storm instead of something, except it was just a Redux store is what they called, that will display our value. However, instead of what we had, with set value over here, we have an action creator which dispatch an actions, and it will up going to reducer, and then the reducer will update it, the state. So essentially these three things is doing what set value is doing over there. So this is a new part, and there's all fancy terms for essentially the function that will update it, the state. So you don't have to worry what you just have know this kind of doing what they representative in the redux architecture. But together, combined, they represent what set value originally does. It is pretty simple idea, but don't forget to block it down by all this terminology. Just know what together is doing, a combination effort of updating the stores. That is redux in a nutshell. But why would you need redux? As we seen with the react and the redux, the react code is way more simpler. Why would you need to do redux? We have done the same exact thing, but redux just have more code. Redux essentially solves two very simple problems. One is being able to access state everywhere easily, which is very attractive. It's a simple issue, but makes everything easier. You can do access state everywhere, like do it once, access anytime. So our first problem, if you look at this diagram of the component, in app we component a component B, and A has a component A, B, and so on. And so forth. Let's say in component B, A, we have state of 0, just like in our example. Over here we create a state particular to this particular component. What if we just want to display this specific particular state? In AB, now React has a limitation. You cannot pass the state upwards. You cannot pass the state up to the top component. If you have even heard of React being an indirectional, Redux has been unidirectional, means the component tree, for example, right here, you cannot pass the 0 up to the app over here. You cannot do. So instead of the solution for React would just to be the prompt state over here, and then you can pass this state down to here, A, then AB, which is a big hassle. Have to pass down prompts through multiple components is a big hassle. A lot of code, same with rewriting. Did so, that is, has the state. This is a problem, because it makes it really like very essential to refactor, rewrite this particular code, not to mention passing all the prompts. Even you have all the states in the app, you would have to pass down prompts multiple times. Every single time you will create a state, which is it's a big hassle to. Instead, the solution is Redux. Redux solves the solution and provide a store that save the app to provide component provider, just another way of providing the store. And the state will go like into this particular store. And now with all the Redux code, we can easily access the store anywhere, anytime through the application. using just a selector. Use selector allows you grab any state in the store and you can access anywhere.